You clicked for the emperor who conquered Britain, and in the next few minutes, we're unveiling the incredible story of Claudius, the overlooked outcast who achieved what even Caesar couldn't. Get ready for a surprising tale of unexpected triumph. After the madness of Caligula, Rome needed stability. And who stepped up? The stammering, often ridiculed Claudius, a man considered a joke by his own family. But his reign would shock everyone, especially with a monumental conquest. Our guide for this underdog story? Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars. How did a seemingly weak and sickly intellectual, a man literally found hiding behind a curtain after an assassination, rise to become a capable emperor and successfully conquer a land as challenging as Britain? What secret strengths did he possess that everyone underestimated? We'll reveal his shrewd political maneuvering, his ambitious military campaign, and the complex character of a ruler far more effective than history often credits. Suetonius's intimate account shows us the hidden genius beneath the awkward exterior. If you love stories of unexpected heroes and underestimated leaders, you're in for a treat. Stick around as we celebrate the remarkable reign of Emperor Claudius. Before we journey to Britannia, please hit that like button, share your thoughts on Claudius in the comments, and subscribe for more surprising stories from ancient Rome. Tiberius Claudius Drusus Caesar. Livia married Augustus while pregnant and gave birth 3 months later to Drusus, the father of Claudius Caesar. Initially named Decimus, and later Nero, there were rumors that Drusus was conceived through adultery with Livia's father-in-law. Yet, a popular verse circulated at the time: 9 months for common births the fates decree, but for the great reduce the term to 3. Drusus served as quaestor and praetor, leading campaigns in Rhaetia and Germania. He was the first Roman general to navigate the Northern Ocean and constructed impressive trenches beyond the Rhine that still bear his name. He defeated enemies in several battles, pushing them deep into the wilderness, but was stopped by a vision of a giant barbarian woman, who forbade his advance in Latin. For his achievements, he received an ovation and triumphal honors. After his praetorship, he became consul but died of disease during a summer campaign, giving the site the name the Unlucky Camp. His body was honored and buried in the Campus Martius, with annual military processions around a monument in his name. The Senate awarded him a marble triumphal arch on the Appian Way and granted him and his descendants the cognomen Germanicus. He was praised for civil and military virtues, earning the rare spolia opima by defeating enemy chiefs in single combat. Some rumored that Augustus grew jealous and had him poisoned, but Augustus deeply respected him, naming him heir alongside his own sons and eulogizing him upon death, even composing an epitaph and recording his story. Drusus left 3 children: Germanicus, Livilla, and Claudius. Claudius was born in Lyon on August 1st, during the consulship of Julius Antonius and Fabius Africanus, the day an altar was dedicated to Augustus. Named Tiberius Claudius Drusus, he later took the name Germanicus after his elder brother's adoption into the Julian family. Orphaned young, Claudius suffered from chronic illnesses that impaired his mind and body, making him unpopular for public or private duties. Even after maturity, he remained under strict supervision by a harsh tutor formerly in charge of mule drivers. His first public appearance at gladiatorial games was from behind a veil, and even his rites of passage were subdued and irregular. Despite these challenges, Claudius devoted himself to learning from an early age, displaying skill across liberal arts. Yet, he never seemed fit for public life. His mother disparaged him as an aborted man, only begun but never finished. His grandmother Augusta treated him with cold contempt, rarely speaking and only reprimanding him in writing or through messengers. His sister Livilla openly expressed outrage at the thought of Claudius becoming emperor, deeming it unworthy of Rome. Augustus's letters reveal a cautious mix of hope and doubt, debating whether Claudius was capable of public service or merely a subject of ridicule. He allowed Claudius minor honors, such as membership in the augural priesthood, and left him only a modest share of his estate. When Claudius sought office, Augustus offered only minor honors and small gifts, discouraging further ambition. Resigned, Claudius lived a quiet life, often in villas or campania, mingling in low society and gaining a reputation for drunkenness and gambling. Yet, he retained public respect. The equestrian order twice chose him as their advocate. He was granted membership in the Augustan priestly college, and when his house was destroyed by fire, it was rebuilt at public expense. Despite efforts by Tiberius to protect him, Claudius suffered constant humiliation at court, forced to endure mockery at banquets and personal slights even as he stood in public roles. Claudius also faced danger, nearly losing his consulship for failing to properly honor Caius's brothers, Nero and Drusus. He was harassed by informers, even among his own servants. During conspiracies against the emperor, Claudius was endangered. Some reports say he was thrown into a river in travel clothes. His standing was so low that he was forced to vote last in the Senate and faced charges of forgery simply for witnessing a will. Financial pressures forced him to sell off his entire estate to meet obligations. Yet fate turned in his 50th year. During chaos following Caius's assassination, Claudius hid in an apartment called the Hermaeum. A soldier discovered and recognized him, saluted him as emperor, and carried him to safety amid great unrest. Though initially fearful and doubting his claim, Claudius accepted the allegiance of the troops by promising them a significant stipend, the first Caesar to secure power with money. Once in power, Claudius acted quickly to erase memories of the recent revolution, granting amnesty to all involved except for a few conspirators who threatened his life. He honored his family and ancestors devotedly, swearing by Augustus and persuading the Senate to deify his grandmother Livia with a grand procession. He established games to celebrate his father and mother, granted the title Augusta to his mother, and commemorated his brother with public spectacles. Claudius also restored a marble arch in honor of Tiberius and forbade the celebration of the day of Caius's assassination, despite it coinciding with his own rise to power. He was modest about his own power, avoiding the title of emperor and refusing excessive honors. He marked his daughter's marriage and his grandson's birthday in private at home. He did not recall any exiles without Senate approval and asked for the military tribunes and praetorian guards to accompany him in the Senate. He also requested judicial authority for his procurators in the provinces and permission to hold fairs on his private estate. Often, he aided magistrates in trials as an assessor and publicly showed respect during spectacles, rising to salute officials politely. When tribunes approached him in court, he excused himself if he could not hear them due to the crowd. His conduct earned public favor, so much so that when a rumor spread that he had been ambushed at Ostia, the people loudly cursed the soldiers and Senate until officials brought proof that he was alive and returning home. However, conspiracies against him arose both from individuals and factions, leading to civil conflict. A man carrying a dagger was found near his chamber at midnight. Two armed equestrians plotted to attack him separately, one outside the theater, the other at the Temple of Mars. Gallus Asinius and Statilius Corvinus, grandsons of famed orators, conspired with many freedmen and slaves against him. His lieutenant in Dalmatia, Furius Camillus Scribonianus, revolted but was defeated swiftly within 5 days after superstitious omens undermined the rebels' resolve. When ordered to march to meet the emperor, the legion's eagles could not be lifted from the ground, whether by accident or divine intervention. Beyond his earlier consulship, he held the office 4 more times, twice consecutively, then after 4-year intervals, serving varying lengths. He was the first emperor to fill a consulship vacancy due to death. Whether in office or not, he regularly attended court sessions, even on family celebrations or public festivals, sometimes bending laws according to his sense of justice. He granted retrials for those insisting on excessive claims in private suits and often imposed harsher punishments than the law prescribed, including condemning some to be exposed to wild beasts. In judging cases, he showed striking inconsistency, at times shrewd, at others rash or distracted. He removed a judge who eagerly sought office despite having children's exemption, and in his own case, when challenged over jurisdiction, he demanded to oversee the trial to show his fairness. For example, when a woman refused to acknowledge her son and no proof was clear, he ordered her to marry the young man to force the truth. He favored parties present in court without investigating absences. On sentencing a forger, he insisted on immediate punishment by cutting off the hand. In a dispute over dress in court, he had the accused change outfits multiple times to demonstrate impartiality. He once wrote simply, "I am in favor of those who spoke the truth," a statement that damaged his reputation. He accepted reasonable excuses for absences and endured persistent delays from advocates who even physically tried to keep him in court. Once, during a dispute, a litigant called him an old fool, and he was publicly insulted and even physically wounded by another challenging his judgment. He revived the ancient censorship, long unused since previous holders. His administration was erratic. For example, he spared a profligate young man due only to his father's praise, saying, "His father is his proper censor." He admonished another notorious for debauchery to temper his behavior but mockingly asked why he must know about his mistress. After removing a mark of disgrace from a knight, he allowed the stain to remain metaphorically. He expelled a distinguished provincial for ignorance of Latin and insisted every man speak for himself in conduct reviews, barring lawyers' pleas. He punished some for leaving Italy without permission or associating with foreign kings, recalling historic treason cases. However, many accused were found innocent after investigation. Once, a knight charged with self-inflicted wounds exposed himself to prove innocence. Among his notable acts, he bought and destroyed an ornate silver carriage at a market, and issued 20 proclamations in a single day, one advising securing wine casks, another recommending use sap as a cure for viper bites. He launched one brief military expedition. Considering triumphal honors beneath his status, he aimed for a true triumph and chose Britain, restless after refusals to return deserters. Sailing from Ostia, he narrowly escaped shipwreck twice near Liguria and the Stochades Islands. Traveling from Marseilles to Gesoriacum by land, he crossed to Britain, which partially submitted without battle. Returning in under 6 months, he celebrated a solemn triumph in Rome and invited provincial governors and exiles to witness it. Among the war spoils, he displayed a naval crown on his Palatine house as a symbol of conquering the ocean, placed near his civic crown. His wife Messalina followed his chariot in a covered litter. Veterans awarded triumphal ornaments rode behind him, with Crassus Frugi adorned in palm embroidery for his second honor. He focused on caring for Rome, ensuring steady supplies. When a severe fire broke out in the Emiliana district, he spent 2 nights coordinating firefighting efforts. With insufficient soldiers or gladiators, officials summoned the citizens to help, incentivizing them with money for their efforts. During food shortages caused by successive poor harvests, a hostile crowd harassed him in the forum, pelting him with bread pieces as he sought refuge. He took extensive measures to bring provisions year-round, guaranteeing merchants protection from sea losses and rewarding shipbuilders. He granted various privileges, such as exemption from certain laws and citizenship rights to Latins and women with 4 children, laws still effective today. He completed important public works, including finishing an aqueduct begun by Caius, creating a drainage canal for Lake Fucine, and constructing Ostia's harbor. Though Augustus had once denied similar projects, and Julius Caesar had abandoned plans for the canal due to difficulty, he persevered. He brought fresh waters into Rome through stone canals and magnificent reservoirs. The Fucine Canal, partly tunneled through a mountain, took 11 years and thousands of workers to finish and was as much a financial venture as a public work. For Ostia's harbor, he built protective piers and sank the vessel carrying a large Egyptian obelisk to stabilize a mole. He also constructed a tall tower modeled after Alexandria's Pharos lighthouse, lighting the port to guide ships at night. He often distributed free grain and money and staged grand public entertainments, both traditional and newly revived, sometimes in venues never previously used. At the reopening of Pompey's theater, he presided silently from a special tribunal after paying respects in the temple above. He revived the secular games, despite some criticism over their timing, and often held circensian games in the Vatican, featuring wild beast hunts after every 5 races. The Circus Maximus was enhanced with marble barriers and gilded goals, and senators received reserved seating. Besides chariot races, he staged exotic events like the Trojan Game and encounters with African wild beasts charged by Praetorian knights, tribunes, and the prefect. Thessalian horsemen performed daring feats with fierce bulls. Gladiatorial shows occurred in various locations annually, including in the Praetorian camp on his accession day, though without hunting or usual equipment. In an unusual event called the Sportula, lasting only a few days, he invited the public to entertainments akin to an informal late supper. He mingled freely with the crowds, counting gold coins aloud and inviting merriment. Sometimes he cheekily called his audience masters, with awkward jokes. When the people begged for a gladiator named Columbus, he joked that he would give them one when caught. He famously spared a gladiator at his son's urgent pleas and sent a message reminding the crowd of the importance of having children, using the event as a lesson in favor. He staged a reenactment in the Campus Martius of a town's assault and sacking and celebrated the surrender of British kings, wearing a general's cloak. Before draining the Fucine Lake, he put on a naval battle, but when the combatants declared their loyalty rather than fighting, Claudius briefly considered punishing them severely. Eventually, pleading and threats convinced them to proceed. The spectacle featured 12 warships each from Sicily and Rhodes, with battle signals signaled by a mechanical silver triton raised from the lake center. Regarding religious ceremonies, civil and military administration, and the condition of all social classes at home and abroad, he reformed some practices, revived others that had fallen out of use, and introduced entirely new regulations. He swore all new priests before appointing them to the various colleges. After an earthquake in the city, he always summoned the people via the praetor and declared holidays for sacred rites. When ominous birds appeared in the city or capital, he ordered a public supplication, reciting its words as high priest from the rostra after exhorting the crowd, who repeated them, while all workmen and slaves were commanded to withdraw. He restructured the courts, ordering them to sit year-round rather than divided between summer and winter. Jurisdiction over trust matters, once granted annually to magistrates in the city only, became permanent and extended provincially. He amended a clause in the Papia Papian law that suggested men over 60 were incapable of fathering children. He allowed consuls to appoint guardians for orphans outside standard procedures, and banned those exiled from any province from entering the city or Italy. Some individuals faced a new kind of banishment, forbidden to stray more than 3 miles from Rome. In important Senate matters, he sat between the consuls in the tribune's seats. He also took for himself the right to grant travel licenses outside Italy, previously the Senate's exclusive domain. He awarded consular honors to his ducenarian procurators and stripped equestrian rank from those refusing the senatorial dignity. Although initially stating that only great-grandsons of Roman citizens could enter the Senate, he gave the broad hem to a freedman's son on condition of adoption by a Roman knight. To defend this, he cited Appius Caecus's election of freedmen's sons, unaware that manumitted persons then were not called freedmen, only their freeborn sons. Instead of requiring quaestors to fund road paving, he ordered gladiatorial games for the people. Relieved of managing Ostia and Cisalpine Gaul, quaestors regained treasury duties previously controlled by praetors. He generously awarded triumphal honors, sometimes excessively, prompting a letter from the legions urging him to grant such honors to consular lieutenants upon command appointment to avoid unnecessary wars. he honored Aulus Claudius with an ovation, accompanying him in a procession and giving him the place of honor. Gabinius Secundus, after conquering the Chauci tribe, was allowed the surname Chaucius. His military organization for equestrians advanced them progressively, from cohort command to auxiliary cavalry wing, then legion tribune. He formed a militia called supernumeraries, paid soldiers held in reserve. The Senate banned soldiers from attending senators' homes as a sign of respect. He confiscated estates of freedmen wrongly assuming equestrian rank. Ungrateful freedmen were returned to slavery on complaint by patrons, with the courts always ruling against them. He freed slaves left in dire condition on the island of Aesculapius, forbidding their owners from reclaiming them, and made killing such slaves murder. He banned travelers from using other than foot or seated transport through Italian towns. Military cohorts were stationed at Puteoli and Ostia to guard against fires. He prohibited foreigners from adopting Roman family names and beheaded false claimants to Roman freedom on the Esquiline Hill. He returned the provinces of Achaia and Macedonia to the Senate and punished the Lycians by revoking their freedoms, while restoring Rhodian freedom after their repentance. Ilium's people were permanently tax-exempt as founders of Rome, commemorated by a letter from the Senate and people of Rome to King Seleucus promising friendship and immunity to their kin. He expelled all Jews from Rome for disturbances stirred by one named Chrestus. German ambassadors, initially seated among the common people, were permitted to sit with senators due to their honorable conduct, asserting equality with Parthian and Armenian ambassadors. He abolished the cruel Druid rites among Gauls, forbidden only under Augustus. Attempting to move the Eleusinian mysteries from Attica to Rome, he also ordered the repair of the ancient Venus Erycina temple in Sicily at public expense. Treaties with foreign princes were made in the Forum with sacrifices and traditional heraldic words. Much of his administration, however, was shaped more by the influence of wives and freedmen than his own judgment. He married twice early, first to Aemilia Lepida, Augustus's granddaughter, whom he divorced before consummation due to her parents' disgrace, then to Livia Medellina, who died on their wedding day. Afterwards, he married Placia Urgulanilla, daughter of a triumphant father, then Aelia Paetina, both later divorced, Urgulanilla for scandal and suspected murder, Paetina for minor dislikes. He next wed Valeria Messalina, cousin's daughter, but executed her for adultery and betrayal, having married another during his absence. He declared to the Praetorians that, unlucky in marriage, he would remain unmarried and permitted them to kill him if he did not. Yet he soon considered new wives, including former Paetina and Lalia Paulina. Ultimately, Agrippina, daughter of Germanicus, ensnared him. The Senate was persuaded to allow the emperor to marry her, lifting the previous incest prohibition, and they wed within 24 hours. No one else followed this precedent except a freedman and a centurion, whose wedding Claudius and Agrippina attended. With 3 wives, he had several children, Drusus and Claudia by Urgulanilla, Antonia by Paetina, Octavia and Britannicus, initially named Germanicus, by Messalina. Drusus died young by choking on a pear. Some wrongly blamed Sejanus. Claudia, fathered by a freedman, was abandoned naked at her mother's door. Antonia married nobles Gnaeus Pompey and later Faustus Sylla. Octavia was married to stepson Nero after a break with Silanus. Britannicus was born on the 20th day of Claudius's reign during his second consulship. He often showed his sons to troops and the public, receiving their cheers. He adopted Nero as son-in-law but dismissed and killed both Pompey and Silanus. Among freedmen, his favorites were the eunuch Posides, honored with a pointless spear during the British triumph, and Felix, promoted to command cohorts, troops, and Judea's governorship, marrying 3 queens. Harpocras enjoyed litter carriage and could host public spectacles. Polybius assisted Claudius's studies and shared honors walking between consuls. Most favored were Narcissus and Pallas, who amassed immense wealth through Senate decrees and were decorated with high honors. Their greed was such that, When Claudius complained of low treasury funds, it was quipped the funds would suffice if they partnered with him. Governed entirely by freedmen and wives, Claudius was more a tool than a ruler, dispensing offices, pardons, and punishments as their whims dictated, often without awareness. He executed Appius Silanus, his son-in-law's father, and Julius without evidence or trial. He killed Pompey and saw the stabbing of Lucius Silanus, betrothed to a Pompey, amid scandal. Silanus was forced to resign as praetor and commit suicide on the day Claudius married Agrippina. Claudius condemned 35 senators and over 300 knights with such carelessness that he once approved an execution order he never gave, as soldiers acted on freedmen's advice to kill enemies without warrants. Claudius also officially signed Messalina's dowry papers for her marriage to Silius, possibly to shift ominous dangers from himself. Physically, Claudius was tall with a dignified presence. His gray hair suited him, and he had a full neck, but feeble knees made his walk ungainly. His laughter was loud and his anger fierce. He would foam at the mouth and nostrils. He stammered and had a tremulous head motion, especially when occupied. Though once very ill, as emperor he was mostly healthy except for stomach pains. During one attack he spoke of suicide. He gave frequent grand feasts, sometimes seating 600 guests together. At a dinner by the Fucine Lake's drainage canal, he narrowly escaped drowning when water surged violently. His supper guests included his children and noble youths who traditionally sat at couches' feet. One suspected of stealing a golden cup was invited again but served a porcelain jug. He even planned an edict permitting flatulence at table after hearing of a man nearly dying from restraint. Claudius ate and drank anytime and anywhere. Once, smelling dinner at the nearby temple of Mars, he abandoned court to join the feast. He rarely left the table before overeating and drinking to intoxication, then sleeping on his back with mouth open. Waking was difficult. Feathers were inserted down his throat to induce vomiting. His sleep was short, often awake before midnight, and sometimes he slept during court, forcing advocates to raise voices or physically rouse him. He indulged women freely but showed no unnatural desires for men. Fond of gaming, he wrote a book on the subject, playing even in his chariot where the gaming tables were stabilized against motion. Claudius's cruel and violent nature showed in both major and minor events. He was eager for executions to be swift and witnessed parricide punishments in person. At Tibur, wanting to see an old method of execution, he bound criminals to stakes but had to summon an executioner from Rome and waited until night for him. In gladiator games, if a combatant fell, especially a retiarius, Claudius ordered their immediate death so he could watch their agony. When two gladiators killed each other, he had small knives made from their swords. He delighted in men fighting wild beasts and often arrived at the theater early, staying through the noon bouts even after dismissing the crowd. He sometimes forced others into deadly combat, including carpenters and assistants if their work on theater machines failed. Even one of his nomenclators was made to fight while wearing a toga. Despite his show of humility early in reign, fear and distrust dominated Claudius. He never attended events without a guard of spearmen and preferred soldiers to serve at his table rather than servants. He avoided visiting the sick until beds and rooms were thoroughly searched and subjected all visitors to strict searches, only later excusing women and children from such treatment. When Camillus plotted against him, he received an insulting letter urging him to resign, briefly considered it, and sought counsel from city leaders. Rumors of conspiracies so alarmed Claudius that he contemplated abdication. When a dagger-wielding man was found near him during a sacrifice, he summoned the Senate in tears, lamenting his insecurity and avoiding public appearances for long after. His fear extended even to his wife Messalina, not just because of her infidelities but fearing she sought to share power with her lover Silius. He fled in panic to the camp, repeatedly asking if the empire was truly his. Claudius's fears often led to impulsive acts. After a man dreamt he witnessed Claudius's murder, Claudius ordered the accused to be executed. Similarly, with the plot against Appius Silanus, his freedmen Narcissus and Messalina conspired to fabricate shared dreams, using them as pretext to condemn Silanus. Claudius later praised his freedmen for guarding him even in sleep. He admitted to being governed by passion and justified such actions as brief or justified. After harshly censuring Ostia residents for not greeting him with boats, he publicly pardoned them, making it seem like an apology. He dismissed rude or troublesome individuals without trial, including a quaestor's secretary and a praetor, the latter punished for finding his tenants illegally selling food and for his steward's interference. He stripped aediles of jurisdiction over cook shops. Claudius openly claimed in speeches that he feigned stupidity under Caligula to survive, but many doubted this. A critical book titled The Resurrection of Fools circulated, arguing no one could fake such folly. Among other traits, Claudius was admired for his indifference and detachment, expressed by Greek terms meteoria and ablepsia. Soon after Messalina's death, at the table he bluntly asked why the empress was absent. He invited condemned men to dine and play games the day after their sentencing, chiding them for slowness. During preparations to marry Agrippina, he affectionately called her "my daughter, my nurse." When adopting Nero, he joked publicly that no one before had become part of the Claudian family by adoption. Often, he spoke carelessly and inattentively, forgetting his status or audience. In Senate debates, he made odd remarks such as, "Who can live without a bit of meat?" and praised candidates for little reasons, like one who had given him cool water when sick. Once, presenting a witness, he emphasized her loyalty despite family members who did not regard him as master. Angered by Ostia's petition, he told them he owed no obligations and acted freely. He frequently repeated phrases like, "What? Do you take me for a Theogonius?" and "Lale kai me thingane, speak but do not touch me," using language below imperial dignity despite his education. Encouraged by Titus Livius and aided by Sulpicius Flavus, Claudius began writing history young. Reading it to an audience was disrupted humorously by collapsing benches under a large man, provoking his laughter. As emperor, he continued writing, having friends read his works aloud. He started his history from Caesar's death but later moved to post-Civil War years to avoid family criticism. He left 2 books on early history and 41 on later events, also writing an 8-book autobiography full of absurdities but well-styled. He defended Cicero against Asinius Gallus's books, a learned work. Claudius invented 3 new letters for the alphabet, publishing a book to promote them. These letters became commonly used in inscriptions. He embraced Greek literature, often praising its excellence. Once, addressing a bilingual stranger, he welcomed skill in both tongues. He expressed special fondness for Achaia due to shared studies, frequently speaking in Greek in the Senate and quoting Homer in court. After exacting revenge, he often told the tribune on guard a Greek phrase meaning, "'Tis time to strike when wrong demands the blow." He wrote 20 books on Tuscan history and 8 on Carthaginian. An Alexandria museum was named after him, where annual readings of these works took place, like classroom lessons. Near life's end, Claudius showed regrets over marrying Agrippina and adopting Nero. After condemning an adulterous woman, he lamented his bad luck with unfaithful wives, noting they never escaped punishment. He tenderly embraced young Britannicus, wishing him swift growth and using a Greek phrase meaning, "He who wounded will also heal." Planning to grant Britannicus manhood rights early due to his stature, Claudius declared it so Rome might finally have a true Caesar. He made his will with magistrates as witnesses but was stopped by Agrippina amid her crimes and accusations. It's agreed he was poisoned, though details are unclear. Some say the eunuch Helotus gave poison at a feast in the capital. Others claim Agrippina poisoned him with mushrooms at his table. Reports vary whether death was sudden or prolonged with attempts to revive. His death was concealed until his successor was secured. Vows for recovery were made, and comedians entertained him, supposedly by his request. He died on October 13, aged 64, after 14 years of rule. His funeral was grand and he was deified. Honors later revoked by Nero and restored by Vespasian. Signs foretelling his death included a comet sighting, lightning striking his father Drusus's monument, and many magistrates dying that year. Claudius seemed aware of his fate, appointing consuls only for his remaining months and urging harmony among his sons in his final Senate appearance. He openly declared in court his mortal end nearing, words that disturbed listeners. Caligula's violent death gave Romans a chance to reclaim liberty, but conspirators lacked a plan. Senate indecision over 2 days allowed soldiers to seize control. By a fortunate accident, Claudius, unremarkable, weak-minded, and despised even by family, was chosen by troops as emperor. Though initially lacking treasury funds for rewards, he promised soldiers 15,000 sesterces each, over £140. The absence of later army unrest suggests he fulfilled this promise. This event laid the foundation of military despotism that shook Rome for centuries. The public clamored not only for a single ruler but especially for Claudius, partly because the common people, least oppressed by tyranny, enjoyed spectacles and distributions under previous emperors. Claudius's humble lifestyle also made him familiar and approachable, raising hopes of gain. Likely, his freedmen orchestrated support behind the scenes. Senate debates showed strong support for restoring the Republic, but the noisy populace and military power ultimately prevailed. The Senate's lost influence since the Republic, coupled with fear of harsh reprisals, discouraged resistance. Claudius began his reign with an amnesty for events following Caligula's death, showing moderation that somewhat redeems his rule. Claudius was 50 when he became emperor. Though previously uninterested in public honors, he now desired to celebrate a triumph. With no current wars, he sought a military victory and chose to invade a distant foreign land, despite Augustus's advice against expanding the empire's borders. Britain was selected, both for its proximity to Gaul and because the Britons had recently complained to Rome about harboring fugitives from their laws. At that time, Britain was divided into many chiefdoms without a united defense. The memory of Julius Caesar's invasion 80 years before had faded, making a sudden Roman attack likely successful. General Aulus Plautius led the invasion, winning several battles and advancing into the country. Claudius set sail from Ostia but was forced by a storm to stop at Marseilles. From there, he traveled to Boulogne and crossed to Britain, landing on its southeast coast. He quickly gained the submission of several tribes: the Cantii, Atrebates, Regni, and Trinobantes. After 6 months away, Claudius returned to Rome and celebrated a grand triumph to mark the campaign. Meanwhile, in Britain's interior, resistance under Caractacus was fierce. Progress stalled until Asturias Scapula arrived, defeating the Silures tribe near the Severn River and capturing Caractacus. News of the British prince spread widely, and his arrival in Rome drew crowds eager to see him. His procession was solemn. The Praetorian troops formed ranks on a plain beside the camp. Claudius and his court stood before the lines with the Roman people behind. The parade displayed trophies taken from the Britons, followed by Caractacus's chained brothers, wife and daughter, who showed fear in their pleading murata and gestures. Caractacus himself approached with dignity and said, "If to my high birth and distinguished rank I had added moderation's virtues, Rome would have seen me more as a friend than prisoner. You would not have refused alliance with a prince of noble ancestors governing many peoples. My defeat brings glory to you, shame to me. I had arms, troops, and wealth. Can it be wrong to defend them? Rome's desire for world dominion need not mean all men must yield. I resisted your arms bravely, granting you glory and myself honor. Now in your power spare my life." I shall stand through ages as a monument to your clemency. Claudius granted pardon to Caractacus and other royal captives, who thanked him warmly. Removing their chains, they expressed gratitude toward Agrippina, who sat nearby. While history offers no further account of Caractacus, it is likely he soon returned home, his valor and noble conduct remembered despite lost fortunes. The reign's most notorious figure was Valeria Messalina, daughter of Valerius Messala Barbatus and Claudius's wife, mother to a son and daughter. Her cruelty matched her shameless immorality. Not confined to the palace, she openly prostituted herself in public brothels and streets. She coerced Consul Gaius Suetonius to divorce his wife to be with her, then persuaded him to marry her. During Claudius's visit to Ostia, they held their wedding publicly, even appearing on the nuptial couch before astonished guests. Though Claudius's temper had been lenient toward her past scandals, he could not ignore such a gross violation of law and decency. Silius was executed for the reluctant adultery, and Messalina summoned to answer for her deeds. Overcome by terror and remorse, she fled to Lucullus's gardens, secretly plotting to calm Claudius's wrath. Attempting suicide twice under pressure from her estranged mother Lepida, she finally died when a tribune stabbed her. Messalina's scandal echoed throughout the empire. The poet Juvenal famously wrote, without exaggeration, Ita lasata viris, nectum satiata, recessit. Juvenal, Satire 6. Claudius was completely controlled by his freedmen, former slaves rewarded with liberty and trusted in managing affairs. Like Cicero's freedman Tiro, who enjoyed close friendship with his master, freedmen were often highly educated and capable administrators in governments run more by sovereign will than policy. Though Claudius seemed unlikely to be a scholar during his reign, when learning waned, he stood out as a writer. Besides history, he wrote a defense of Cicero against Asinius Gallus's accusations, the only favorable work on Cicero from Livy's time until the Caesar's end. Asinius Gallus, son of the orator Pollio, married Vipsania after her divorce from Tiberius, angering the emperor, and died of famine, whether by choice or imperial order. Gallus favored his father over Cicero in comparisons, showing filial bias over fairness.